Hello everyone, we're here for our second video in the Pentax H3v series. This is the second of two videos. We looked at all of the features in the first video. Now we're going to look at how to actually use some of these features. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this camera over like this. I'm going to take the body cap off. Anytime you have a camera that doesn't have a lens on it, should keep a body cap on it so that it protects the insides and keeps them dust free. Also helps the keep some of the dirt out that can make a camera fall apart or fail. Well, not fall apart, but fail more quickly. So I'm going to put on a 55mm 1:1.8 lens. This is the lens that this model H3v came with out of the box. Not this exact same lens on this camera, but this is how it came. And this is a newer H3v signified by the orange R, so it can use this lens. The older H3vs could not. You can see it works just fine with this lens. Advance it to a thousandth of a second here. Now, so right now, this camera is ready to take a picture. The cocked indicator is orange, telling me that it's ready to go. The only thing is there's just no film in it. So how these features work together is, let's say for instance that you want to take a family photo. Put this on a tripod, set the timer for 10 seconds, give you enough time to run around the camera and then go take the photo with the family. There we go. It's going to count down for 10 seconds. Not the most pleasant noise, but at least you can hear it as you're running. There it goes. Takes the picture. So you can put it on the tripod, use the self-timer. That's pretty basic stuff. All these old cameras are pretty much basic stuff. One thing that's nice about these old cameras with the M42 mounts is that they have this M and A on the lens. Automatic aperture, manual aperture. When it's on automatic, the lens will, the flapper switch that flapper paddle that we, smacky, whatever it's called, that we talked about in the previous video. When it's on automatic, when you're looking through the viewfinder, you will always see the maximum aperture, in this case f1.8, giving you a very bright viewfinder. When, right before the picture's taken, that paddle slaps up, causes the aperture to shut, the picture's taken, then the paddle releases, causing the aperture to open, so that when the picture's taken, the aperture is set correctly for the metering. That's how the automatic aperture function works on these old cameras. Get these out of the shot because they're distracting. So here's the next thing we're going to do. That's really the basic features, or the basic feature of how to use this camera. When you have film in it, you just hit the shutter and it's ready to go. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is how to load film into this camera. With the camera back opened, I'm going to take this old roll of film. This is my demonstration film for these videos. And there we go. I'm going to put it in there, lower the film rewind knob. I'm going to bring this over and insert the film into this slit on the film take-up spool. It's set on 1,000th, so I just tripped the shutter. Now, one thing to make sure of is that the film holes are lined up with the sprockets. You want to make sure that that is the case when you load this, so that the film advances properly, the count advances properly, and that you don't end up with damaged sprocket holes, which has happened to me on a few rolls of film. It's unfortunate and difficult to deal with. So as you take pictures, what's happening inside of your camera is that this plate over here is pressing the film plane down flush against the back of the shutter, like that. So the film plane right now is bowed, but when the pressure plate's in place, it presses it down flat. And then you take the picture, the light comes in through the lens, exposes the film, you advance it, and it goes on to the next frame. That is how it works. It's very basic, but very reliable as well. Let's see. phone keeps shutting its screen off, so I can't tell. Oh yeah, okay. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to show you how to unload the film. You hit this rewind button down here. That is the film. What this does is the sprocket can only move forward until you hit this button, and now the sprocket's free floating in there. So it'll move forward or backward. Now I just have to rewind the film with the film rewind lever. Uh-oh. That was close. Wouldn't want to have to run a second roll of this film for these demonstrations. Okay, and that's how you unload the film. You rewind it the entire way into the thing, and then unload it. And that's that. It's pretty easy. Now, I want to get into some slightly more in-depth features of this camera. And I'm going to take the lens off for this to give you guys better visibility of the front of the camera for a minute. Okay, so we talked in the last video about X-Sync and Flash, FP, X Xenon, and flat, whatever it is, the FP sync. I've forgotten already what it stands for. At any rate, so the flash sync speeds, FP is for faster flashes, for flashes faster than the X sync speed. On this camera, the Xenon, the X sync speed is 1/50th of a second. On many other cameras, it's 1/60th, 1/125th, in that range. FP will allow a flash to be used on any speed up to 1,000th of a second, which is as fast as this camera goes. Let's zoom in here real quickly so we can see it again. So FP is on top, X is on the bottom. And they have slightly different functions that allow them to be used at different shutter speeds. They have slightly different functions that allow them to be used at different shutter speeds. The FP, what this does is, so okay, let's start with the X. It's simpler. The X is the standard type of flash that you're probably familiar with. You take the picture, and there's a bright flash of light, and you've got a picture. If you set your shutter to, let's say, 1/500th of a second and use X, you're only going to get part of your picture exposed from the flash. What happens is, let's say that this is the opening in the shutter plane that goes across the film, the negative, in a 1/500th of a second. If your flash goes off right now, what's going to happen is that only where this opening is on the film plane are you going to get light hitting the flash. So X is only for 1/50th of a second and slower, and 1/50th is probably about when the entire frame is exposed at once. FP, we'll get into more in depth into this during a later video about flash syncing specifically. What this does is this sends out pulses of light throughout the entire shutter movement, and what that does is it allows the flash to be used at 1/250th, 1/500th, 1/1000th in this case. In fact, I've read that it allows the flash to be used as fast as 1/8000th of a second and still function on properly without telling how fast the shutter speed actually was. And now what that means for these old cameras is that, let's say, let's see. So if you wanted to use an electronic flash, which is, I believe, your standard flash, it would have to be an X flash. If you wanted to use an F-class or M-class flash, and I believe those are old types of flashes that are obsolete, you probably would never have to use them. But so, for instance, the electronic flash is 1/50th of a second or slower. An F-class flash will work at 1/30th of a second or slower, and an M-class flash at 1/15th of a second or slower. Whereas the FP, if you use a screw-base flash, which is another obsolete type of flash, you can take pictures from 1/50th up to 1/1000th. And if you use a bayonet flash, which I don't know if you can still get that, or the screw-base flashes anymore, that's 1/250th up to 1/1000th of a second. Those are the two FP flashes. So we're back, still looking at this this H3v here, and we just finished talking about the flashes. This next part is the focusing diopter on the back. This is a 1.0x diopter, meaning it does not include any kind of correction. You cannot adjust it for your if you have a prescription, and you cannot adjust it to account for whatever prescription you might have if you wear glasses. Oops. The viewfinder inside of this. Let's see if we can see this here a little bit. All right, that's what the viewfinder looks like, and you can see it's two concentric circles. I'm holding right there in the center, and they're on a ground glass Fresnel lens, and the center circle, the smaller of the two, is a series of microprisms, and if the subject is, oops, let's get back in frame. If the subject is in focus, then it will look like it's in focus, and if it's not, on the Fresnel ground glass, it's going to be blurry, as you can see here, but in the microprism, which is a little bit harder to see, I think, it will look like newsprint up close, and that's how you can tell whether it's focused or not focused. Now, as I promised, we've got some fun facts about the Pentax H3v for you to close out this video, and we're just going to go ahead and get into those. The Pentax H3v in pop culture was used by John Lennon. Not kidding. John Lennon, there's a number of pictures of him on the plane with the Beatles and other places with his Pentax H3v or SV. More likely because he was from England, it was probably an SV. Next fun fact is that if you ever watch the movie A Hard Day's Night, there's a scene in there, and I don't know which one, where Ringo Starr is holding an SLR. That's an H3v. So the Beatles seem to have a thing for their Pentaxes and their H3vs in particular. The pentaprism, which is housed inside of here, weighs 2 ounces. It's high quality optical glass, and it has 25 polished surfaces. Yes, that's fun for me. That's a fun fact. Also, these cameras were all assembled by hotties. That's right. There's a picture in the manual of these things being put together by a bunch of Asian chicks in nurse uniforms. I guess they didn't know what else to put into the manuals back then. It is kind of lacking for content in some places. Also, if your lens is orange or brown, and let's see if we can show you that here. Okay, you can see how the lights, those are my lights. Those are my studio lights, big air quotes, studio lights. There are a couple of shop lights hanging off my cupboard. But you can see how they're reflecting orange there in the lens coating. The old Takumars and Mamiya lenses turned orange because of the radioactivity in the glass. So as the glass, as the radioactivity, as the half-life of the materials has caused parts of it to break down on I don't know. It's radioactive is what it means. Doesn't affect the lens quality. Still a great lens. You can just read it with a Geiger counter. Also, it's not going to give you cancer, which is why that's a fun fact. Okay, so that brings us to the end of these two videos about the Pentax H3v and their radioactive Takumar lenses. It's not a big deal. I read a story about a guy, actually heard it from him. He sold all of his Takumar lenses because he was afraid of the radiation. My understanding from someone who knows far more about this stuff than I do is that the amount of radiation in these Takumar and Mamiya lenses is less than, like, having that lens on you for a year is less than you would have from a chest x-ray or from living in Colorado. Not because Colorado is radioactive, but because granite emits small amounts of radiation. So Colorado's mostly on top of granite. Anyway, that's all way off the point. The point is, this is a great camera. It is an old camera that will last as long as you take care of it. It's a lot of fun to use. It will take pictures just as well as any modern camera, as long as you know how to use it properly, and it's pretty easy to use, so it's a pretty easy learning curve. If you have a chance to pick one of these up, I got this one for 10 bucks. I had to pay to get it repaired, but I've seen these in perfect working order go for 15 or 20 bucks. And so they're pretty cheap. They're a good camera option. Really, really nice, very sturdy, and just strongly recommend this camera if you're looking for a good camera either to use or to learn with or just have fun with once in a while. That is the Pentax H3v.